What's up, Shadowholics? Hope your day is off to an awesome start. Now, many of you might be looking at this and thinking, like, "Hey, Michael, that's not Death Shadow." To which I say, "That's correct. That's a pretty good observation. This is clearly not Death Shadow. This is actually five color domain Zoo." For those of you who don't know, Zoo's an archetype that I love to play, but I'm not very good at it. So y'all get to witness some of the bumbling around trying to figure out the deck, get used to some of the lines, and try out some of the cool new tech. For example, we showed a league a few days ago that Ara231 ran to a top 4 finish in one of the modern challenges with Tireless Tracker in the deck. And since then, I've been having a lot of fun casting Tireless Trackers in Zoo. So here we get to go through another league where we make a few little updates here and there, trying out some reprieves from Black Belt MTG's list, trying out, oh man, cards, stuff, third in the Shober Brawler, just normal little things here and there, trying to get used to Zoo again. I say again for the first time. Played it a little bit a while back, but trying to reinvigorate my understanding of the archetype, I guess is the best way to say it. So, as always, if you're enjoying this kind of content, enjoying the commentary, feel free to drop a follow. And yeah, words are tough. Feel free to drop a subscription on the YouTube channel. It does not cost you anything, lets you know when we post new content. Otherwise, link to the deck list down below, as well as link to the Twitch account if you want to come check out a live stream. Link to the Twitter in case you want to know whenever new streams are going live. Twitter is the first place it gets updated. And finally, a link to the Control Freak Discord if you want to come hang out, talk everything Death Shadow or non-Shadow. If you just have questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to drop on by. Otherwise, let me know down in the comments below if there's a deck you'd really like to see, if I haven't played it on stream yet, or some kind of change that you think would be interesting that I should check out. Otherwise, let's go ahead and hop into this Domain Zoo League, check out a little bit of this archetype, and see if maybe it's something you want to pick up for your next FNM. So, match number 1, we are on the draw. I will say Zoo is probably the archetype that I've seen that gets the most punishment from the play draw disparity. And a lot of that is because if you're starting off with like a turn 1 piece of interaction, for example, Stubborn Denial, a 2-drop, or Lightning Bolt, a 1-drop, then you're not going to be able to get Domain online on turn 2 to cast like Scion of Draco. So you have to be a little careful. Like maybe you want to get a Sacred Foundry on turn 1 to be able to get a Zagoth, the Sultai-colored Triumph, on turn 2 to Leyline Binding for 1 mana. But it can be a little bit awkward if you're trying to like play a 1-drop spell into a 2-drop threat into hopefully have Domain on 3, because the deck doesn't have that many lands. It's like 21. So, for example, here we see a Ragavan on 1. We don't have any way of interacting with this on turn 1. So now we have to tank a hit, try to get like a Triome and a Shock Land or something, and interact with Ragavan on turn 2. Whereas if we were on the play, we would be able to play out a 1-drop or hold up Stubborn Denial on 1, get a Triumph, turn 2, maybe Tribal Flames the Ragavan, or just Leyline Binding it, whatever the case may be. But here we're just going to hold up a soft Stubborn Denial in case our opponent goes for something like a Blood Moon here. Get to dodge Blood Moon. They do get a Ledger Shredder, but we will have the opportunity to untap, interact with this, or just get down like a threat here. Really want to use these Tribal Flames on something like Ledger Shredder so I can save Leyline Binding for a mURktide Regent. Since our opponent did not reveal a Gigantha, I'm going to go ahead and assume that this is just blue-red mURktide until I see otherwise. Playing out Neshoba Brawler first, because if my opponent does have some sort of interaction, I'd rather them kill the Neshoba Brawler than the Scion of Draco. Mainly because the Scion can potentially block like a Dragon's Rage Channeler going forward, can also dodge Lightning Bolt where a Neshoba Brawler can't. So using up some of that spot removal, going ahead and firing off a Stubborn Denial just to try to get some of the interaction out of the way. Bait with the Scion of Draco that lets us resolve our Leyline Binding to deal with this mURktide. Get in some attacks. And honestly, like if our opponent has nothing, then they are dead next turn. Unfortunately, they have 5 cards, so 4 cards. So we assume they've got something. But they did just spend their entire turn like trading Ragavans and Odawaring my Neshoba Brawler. So I feel like if I'm able to get Brawler back down, I'm in good position. Fire off the Tribal Flames. I'd rather hold up Dramoka's command, but since I don't have the second green source, I can't. So I'd rather just go ahead and make sure this Tribal Flames resolves than risk not having it resolve. Get in with our Neshoba Brawler. If opponent did have a burn spell for the Brawler, we could Dramoka's command to kind of stifle that. But since they didn't, go ahead and give a shot to uh, the Tribal Flames there. If it did work out, we end the game. If it didn't work out, the only thing that really punishes us off the top is another mURktide Regent. Sideboarding against the blue-red mURktide deck. I basically boarded out a bunch of stuff that dies to Bolt. So a bunch of the what's the name of it? Wild Nicottle. Bunch of Wild Nicottles, a Ragavan. Boarded in to Fairies, Rest in Pieces, and Flusterstorm. So here, Territorial Kavu, one of the absolute best threats in the matchup. Dodges Lightning Bolt, eats stuff out of the yard. Unfortunately, dies to Dress Downs. That's pretty rough for the home team here. But hey, we get another Kavu. Like, what's better than a 1 Kavu, 2 Kavu? What's better than 2 Kavu? Your opponent milling over Dress Down with their Thought Scour. So, opponent is down to 3 cards. If they're interacting over this Ragavan, then I'm kind of hoping they might untap, play a mURktide, no counter spell, and I can potentially Leyline Binding. We see no threat out of our opponent. Little scary. Probably means they have counter spell, but hey, we can play out Scion, hold up Binding anyway. We're right on the counter spell. See what our opponent does this turn. If they do nothing, we're pretty likely to Tireless Tracker. If they do something, then we'll see. I kind of want to just assume they don't have another counter spell and hope. Be mana efficient, because if I go to my turn and I happen to find a land, I would really like to get down this Kavu. So again, since I've already said like Kavu, I think is one of the best threats in the matchup by a mile. I would rather my opponent like fight over or unholy heat this Scion of Draco and leave my Kavu alone. Like maybe it doesn't work out that way, but I'm optimistic. Some would say blindly so. But we end up getting to a point where we do get to attack our opponent with a Kavu, and that's about all you can ask for. We could exile the Mishra's Bauble or the Dress Down, work on Delirium. At Delirium, we could also discard a Tireless Tracker just to try to have more spells to cast. So, hand's pretty clunky, but we do have just like a turn 2 Kavu or Scion of Draco here. Kavu seems pretty good if our opponent's like ditching relevant things to Underworld Cookbook. Um, so they do have the option to just get a second cookbook here, play it, make another food, shoot the Kavu. They discarded a lightning bolt, so they probably don't have an oval chase Daredevil in hand. But still, getting rid of the Kavu is probably the best thing they can do. Alas, they decide not to do that and give me this golden opportunity to top deck a way of killing the Asmarano Mordekaiser in a Kuldakar. And I will gladly oblige because I get to kill the or exile the Kroxa, attack him with Kavu, and now I'm just like slowly whittling down to lethal burn range. We picked up a Tribal Flames, which is perfect. Let's talk about this line. My opponent goes to terminate the Kavu. I decide if they have to fetch, then maybe I can set up like attack him with Scion and Tribal Flames next turn. If they don't fetch, I still feel like I'd rather hold on to this Stubborn Denial. I could fight over the terminate there, and it would honestly be fine, but like we saw right here, our opponent decided to fetch, decided to use up their mana, so now they're just dead to the Scion and the Tribal Flames, and I did not have to tap off of the Stubborn Denial. So things worked out for us, but it worked out for us because we played with information we knew about, which was, hey, they have a fetch land. We've got 5 points of burn in hand. Now, if they like went to their turn and just cracked clues or something, that would be fine because ultimately they wouldn't be progressing the board in any meaningful way, but they didn't. Sideboarding against like this Asmo food deck, I'm bringing in stuff like um, engineered explosives. What's it called? The Hidetsugu. What is it? Something Hidetsugu something. And then opponent drops Blood Moon. So Kroxa game one, I wasn't too shocked to see, but Blood Moon game two makes me think this is not a dedicated Asmo food deck because you wouldn't want to cut off Urza's Saga, and Saga is like one of the best cards you have access to in that archetype. So now I'm thinking I might want to change up my game plan going to game three because now this is feeling like it's just Rakdos mid range that happens to have the Urza package. And honestly, I should have seen the signs. We saw Dolthy and Kroxa game one, plus Terminate. We never saw a Saga. Game two, we see Blood Moon there. So, and Ragavan. Very much an issue of, hey, Michael, you should probably pay attention to the cards because it turns out you can learn something from them. Down our tireless tracker, go to combat first because if our opponent doesn't have anything, I would like to hit them, make a treasure, cast the second tireless tracker, and then the windswept teeth and just get 4 clues. But we'll settle for 2 here, I guess. Hold up the ability to get a basic plains in case opponent does play a blood moon. We could get a basic forest, but I kind of like the plains to be able to ley line binding if it comes off the top. Instead, opponent's just going to play a Dolthy. So we're going to be a little mana efficient here and just like crack a clue before we decide anything. Here, since Dolthy can't block, we get to just hit them, bolt them, move on with our lives. Go to game 3 or go to match 3. Yeah, that was game 3 of match 2. So now we're on to game 1 of match 3. See, I got this. I'm keeping up. In the words of the great Toby Keith, I ain't as good as I once was at remembering what game and match I am at a pre-recorded League of Magic the Gathering. Very obscure set of lyrics that he put into that song. But here on the draw, I've got Ragavan on turn one. I could also bolt my opponent's turn one play. They breeding pool and pass. So I didn't really know what it was, but obviously living in makes perfect sense. We top deck a stubborn denial, which is chef's kiss draw. So now we can actually get down our wild Nicodle, hold up stubborn denial in case they go for a shardless agent on their turn. Waker of the Way is pretty good. Them ditching over shardless agent makes me think they have to have a cascade spell. There's no way you just give up the shardless agent. Go for the bolt. They go for the violent outburst on my turn. All I can do is hope that they don't have access to a force negation. But with 4 cards in hand, it's probably pretty likely that they do. So they're going to go ahead and resolve that living end. We will leyline binding the Waker Waves just as the biggest thing. But we're going to be taking a lot of damage here. Just the off chance we might be able to find like a threat to stand in the way or something relevant, but we don't. So we get to go to game 2. But we've got a ton of stuff for living in. We've got Fluster Storms in the board. We've got Rest in Pieces, Teferi Time Revelers, Reprieves, Hope and a Prayer, because we're mulliganing to 5. Or at least our 5 is like Ragavan plus a Reprieve. Then we exile living in. Like, that's exciting. Maybe we just hit them 3 times and exile all their living ends. We get down our double threat. We've got Reprieve up. Hope our opponent doesn't have a force of negation. Reprieve, and they scoop the game. So they revealed their hand after that. They had 2 living ends in hand, and then the one we exiled off Ragavan. So I'm just assuming they had access to no more in the deck, which we'll take. Game 3 on the draw. Having Ragavan turn 1 is phenomenal. Getting to follow up that turn 1 Ragavan with making a treasure, playing a Kavu, holding up Flusterstorm is even more so. So the only thing that could have made this hand better is if this basic forest was a fetch land, so we could get a Temple Garden and have a ferocious territorial Kavu. But unfortunately, we just have to settle for the boring non-ferocious Kavu. It's good enough to at least force spike a living end here. More stubborn denials is good, but less good if we can't find the land to make the Kavu ferocious. So opponent's going to pass back to our turn. We're going to try again to enable ferocious, which we find this lightning bolt or this windswept heath, which means we do have the ability to make the Kavu ferocious. But if we want to get double stub online, we have to get a breeding pool with this second windswept heath, which means we cannot get the Kavu ferocious. Thankfully, the gods of magic have determined that our opponent's not going to find a 4th land drop, and we get to triple soft stub 3 living ends, and that is all she wrote on that one. Love to see it. So this is match number 4. We're on the draw, but we do have Lightning Bolt and a stub into a potential Neshoba Brawler. Top decking Ragavan's phenomenal. Even in the face of Esper Sentinel, at least means you get to use your mana on turn 1 very proactively. My opponent did not attack with Esper Sentinel. You might think this was a mistake. I think this is a Metallic Rebuke. So instead of just throwing out this Neshoba Brawler into it, letting my opponent untap with all their mana, I'm just going to let them go to their turn. And then when my opponent taps off of Metallic Rebuke, I'll kill this Esper Sentinel and go back to my turn, where I can play out a Neshoba Brawler and hold up a Soft Stubborn Denial. yet again. Get an extra red source since I've got this double tribal flame situation going on. We called the Metallic Rebuke. We get down to Shover Brawler, which will be attacking as a 5/3 next turn, thanks in part to the swamp typing of Zagoth Triumph. It's got a Wall of Omens down. Decide to go for an Overgrown Tomb with this newly found Wooded Foothills so that I can save the Zagoth Triumph to cycle. Hoping that my opponent wouldn't block with the Wall of Omens, so I'd be able to double Tribal Flames there. But since they did block, I decided to save this Tribal Flames in case he untapped and played something like an Urza Lord High Artificer. But here I'm just saying, I don't think you have a second Metallic Rebuke. I can't afford to let you untap with a Thopter Foundry, so here's my stuff. Go crazy. Sideboarding. I boarded out some Ragavans because of like Esper Sentinel and Wall of Omen, stuff like that. And some Tireless Trackers because if they're on a Thopter Sword combo list, then I want to be able to interact early and often. And I think Tireless Tracker is just going to be a little too slow at doing that. Get down Kavu here while my opponent's tapped off of Metallic Rebuke. Unfortunately, they do find a Stoneforge Mystic. So we're going to have to knock that out. I'm not afraid of them putting in the Sword of the Meek that they got. I'm afraid of them also having a Cauldra already in hand. And now that they've got another one, and I know they've got a Cauldra in hand, I have to kill this one. Spellbomb's pretty good. We are flooding out pretty badly. Like 7 lands, turn 5. I don't... Kavu, Tribal Flames, Stubborn. I don't actually think we've drawn a non-land card this game. So opponent gets down Shadow Spear. They do have Metallic Rebuke open again. So I really need this Stubborn Denial to find like a what's it called? A Leyline Binding or a Lightning Bolt. I scooped it up there. I know that the Hidetsugu can hit the Portable Hole and the Shadow Spear, but because the token of Cauldra Complete has Indestructible, it cannot deal with that token. So that token would, in fact, run us over pretty quickly. But game 3, we get a really good hand with Ragavan plus interaction into potential Scion of Draco. Get our Sacred Foundry here so that if we do need to, or do hit with the Ragavan, Wooded Foothills could fetch up a Zagoth Triumph, which would let us get down a Scion of Draco. Didn't want to dash the Ragavan again, so I could just get Zagoth Triumph, potentially get down the Scion, hold up mana. Decided I did not want to fire off the Scion into a Metallic Rebuke, which, as we see here, they had. I do think I did a pretty solid job this match of playing around these Metallic Rebukes. It could have been very, very dangerous. But here, my thought is literally I came here to cast Tireless Trackers. Maybe Scion of Draco plus Bolt the Esper Sentinel or Hold Up Bolt is better. But I think if my opponent doesn't do anything too impactful on this turn, which they did have a double Portable Hole, Metallic Rebuke, Esper Sentinel opener. So there's a reasonable chance they don't have a good follow-up. But I kind of figure if they don't do anything impactful on that turn 3, then I just get to untap with a Tireless Tracker, resolve a Scion, have a Lightning Bolt, whatever the case may be. So let's crack in with Tracker. I really don't know why they blocked with this Ingenious Smith here. Um, like, I'm happy that they did, but I don't think that block made a ton of sense. So Stoneforge gets Cauldra complete. We're going to dash Ragavan because we can still hold up Bolt and Stubborn Denial, but I think my opponent's likely to trade with something. And if they block the Esper Sentinel on the Ragavan, then I get to pay the Stoneforge without having to pay one, or bolt the Stoneforge without having to pay one. If they block the Ragavan with the Stoneforge, then I just don't care about the Cauldron in hand. So either way is a pretty big win-win. Bolt, hold up, Stubborn Denial for Metallic Rebuke. Unfortunately, they have Flusterstorm, which was so far out of what I was expecting right there. Nowhere was Flusterstorm on my radar. But we do get to untap, hold up stub. We get to make our attack. And if we just find something like Lightning Bolt, we are presenting lethal here. So opponent puts in their Cauldra. That's fine. I'm getting at least 4 damage through. And then they've got 1 card in hand. I've got Lightning Bolt and a Ferocious Threat to protect it. So getting out of there with the win. Very, very nice. So this is match 5. My opponent's name is GDS in Modern. I played them like a week ago, and they were in fact not on GDS in Modern. And obviously, being somebody who plays a lot of GDS in Modern, I took it kind of personally. Uh, so when they proceeded to like beat the absolute heck out of me with whatever they played, I can't even remember. I took offense. So we get to go into our trophy match, looking for revenge. See a Thraben Inspector, so some sort of ephemerate deck. Field of Ruins got me a little confused. Maybe it's like a Value Town deck, something like that. Uh, the Temple Garden Field of Ruin opener, I think, is a little all over the place. I want to get in this hit with Ragavan. Like, I know this Leyline Binding looks super aggressive, but I just feel like I need to get in the Ragavan attack so I can keep my mana available. I'm really worried that if I don't and they start Field of Ruining me out of the game, I'm just like not going to have access to the colors of mana that I need to cast all this stuff. So Ranger Captain of Eos and Haywire Might to potentially take out my Leyline Binding, be able to get all of their, or get their Thraben Inspector back. Yet again, like, no idea what my opponent's playing. And they fire off this double block. So I'm like, all right, I crack a clue, trade off with your board, draw a card, and then just get to play out like a Kavu or something. Like, that doesn't sound terrible. Oh, Abiding Grace. So it's Martyr Proc. I don't know. Maybe somebody in the comments plays Martyr Proc regularly or knows about the deck more than I do. If there was any sign up until now that this was Martyr Proc, I'm curious to know what it is because I did not pick up on that by anything. Like, maybe the Thraben Inspector should have been a giveaway. Maybe the Field of Ruin effects and the white deck should have been a giveaway, but just didn't see it. So, unfortunately, if we don't find a way to interact with this Kami of False Hope very quickly, they do just have the ability to loop Kami with Abiding Grace, and they can sacrifice it after our Territorial Kavu trigger goes on the stack, so we don't get an opportunity to exile it. So we're just kind of hoping that maybe we can find a Bolt, a Leyline Binding, something. Obviously, a Binding, we could just Binding the Abiding Grace. But opponent's going to start sacking. I don't really mind them getting an attack back in here because ultimately, like, my goal is to find an answer to this Kami. And if my opponent starts dwindling me down, so be it. I just want to crack clues. That looks like a whole lot of not answers to a Kami. Yeah. So Solitude exiling Territorial Kavu means we just like can't interact with the Haywire Might. We can't interact with the Kami if we do find an answer. So we're gonna go to game two. Matchup looks absolutely abysmal. Like them having access to all these Field of Ruin effects, the Abiding Grace. Ragavan's definitely coming out. Stubbs coming mostly out. And I'm just trying to keep something proactive and aggressive. Like, I know they have Solitude, so they're going to be able to interact with a bunch of stuff anyway. But maybe if kind of like this, I'm able to put down a reasonable clock, get my opponent on the back foot quickly. Maybe I have a chance of stealing a little bit here. Stubborn Denial for anything we can. Stubborn Denial. No real great way of putting that. Kavu, really, really good pickup. Solitude, really, really unfortunate. If they did have like an ephemerate right there, it's just game over on the spot. But I'm just trying to interact with an abiding grace. Yeah. So sub the abiding grace. I get to attack him with a Kavu that's definitely exiling this Thraben Inspector in case of another abiding grace. Add our Gigantha because we can get Temple Garden to be able to Leyline Binding if need be. And then I believe this was just my opponent trying to see like how many basics I actually had access to kind of enable or not enable to inform them going into game three. Like probably didn't have anything they could do. Game three, I went heavy on like the rest in pieces, the Hidetsugus, just to try to make sure I didn't get got by any sort of abiding grace loop. Uh, Fortunately, this decision looks a whole lot better when your opponent leads on a turn to Mistveil Plains, and Rest in Peace just shuts that off. So if you don't know Mistveil Plains, it's a uncommon land from Shadowmoor way back in Lorwyn block. It lets you put cards from your graveyard back into your library, so you can use things like Squadron Hawk to chump block, use the Mistveil Plains to put the Squadron Hawk back into your library, and then eventually you find one, find the other ones that you've been putting back in your library as you go. So you can create a loop of like, hey, I'll play out 2 Squadron Hawks or something. I'll chump block, put one back into my library, play the third from my hand, go get the one I just put back from my library, and just start like circling through like that. Pretty cool. But here we're just going to Leyline Binding the Ring. I know they've got protection this turn. They drew their card. So be it. We're here to hopefully win the long game and not worry too much about the short. Going for the Demolition Field on my breeding pool. I cannot get a blue source off this, so I want to Lightning Bolt the Solitude before the Demolition Field resolves in case they have an Ephemerate. Then I can Stubborn Denial it. Which I don't actually have a clue if they're an Ephemerate deck or not. But fighting over Winds of Abandon, definitely not in my repertoire at the moment. Casting Territorial Kavus, however, is. So want to keep this Flooded Strand uncracked, so if I get the opportunity, I can fetch up a Steam Vents to enable Ferocious. Also happens to give me my 5th land type. So Kavu back to full power. Fortunately, Prismatic Ending plus Winds of Abandon. A little rough. Thankfully, this Abiding Grace, not really doing a ton right here. Just gain a life every turn. Ranger Captain gets a Giant Killer. I was kind of surprised by that. I really thought they were going to get a Haywire Might. But obviously, this is way better for me because I get a 2-for-1 with Hidetsugu, get to kill off the Ranger Captain. And now this Hidetsugu is essentially like suspend 3 for a 3/3 that gets a 1/1 counter when it hits you. The fact that I got to knock out a couple creatures, obviously very nice, but not the whole reason to play it. And then they follow up with Emiria the Skyrune, which if I did not have Rest in Peace, would be a nightmare of a card to deal with. So if you don't know Emiria, it's a land from original Zendikar with like Valakut and Oran Reef, stuff like that. That says whenever a planes enters, if you have like 7 more planes, you get to return a creature from your graveyard to the battlefield. So really, really good at making sure you can keep looping a lot of these like ETB effects, these chump blockers, stuff like that. Um, so we got opponent at 18 life. We're at 7. We're dead in 2 turns in the air to Squadron Hawks. Fortunately, we do race pretty well because we've got 8 power worth of Tramplers with the Vessel and the Neshoba Brawler, plus the 3 on the Wild Nicodle. So we've got a 2-turn clock if our opponent doesn't block and like doesn't top deck something. Since we're presenting 11 total right now, we kill them even through the Abiding Grace triggers unless they chump block. But if they chump block the Wild Nicodle, it means that they are not presenting a 2-turn clock back on us. So that's really good. They take the first hit, means we've got 9 trample damage coming back. So when they make this attack with Squadron Hawk and they have no cards in hand for Martyr of Sands, even with the 1 life gain from Abiding Grace, we do have them dead on the crackback with the Vessel and the Shoba Brawler attacking in. The Wild Nicodle is just like icing on the cake, but I think there's a reasonable chance that our opponent did not see or didn't notice that like maybe one of our threats, like the Hidetsugu, had trample. So a little bit of a surprise twist there, and it worked out in our favor. So that was a trophy with Zoo. Really, really cool. Like I said before, I really enjoy this archetype. I've enjoyed picking it back up here recently. This is 2 trophies with Zoo, as well as a couple 4-1s. I'm really interested in trying out some different cards in the deck as well. For example, you see the Miglos up there. I know Black Belt MTG is big on Miglos, but like Burst Lightning is one that I've really enjoyed before, giving an extra couple answers to Ragavan on turn 1. I've tried Minor Misstep, another one that Black Belt has played before, and I plan on trying out Hex Drinker. Again, if you're a big Zoo fanatic or a big Zoo player, like there's a bunch of really fantastic Zoo content creators that present a world of really awesome ideas. Meddling Mage up there is one I'm wanting to try. If Living End is becoming more popular, really good way to just like shut off Living End. Hushbringer, Lavinia are stuff I'm looking at. But ultimately, like, I don't have enough experience with Zoo yet to really feel knowledgeable about some of the minute decisions. I just feel good about most of my gameplay in actual matches. So I'm hoping that I can raise that awareness of the archetype up to kind of help me make personalized decisions based on my gameplay like I do with Death Shadow. But that's all we got for this video. As always, if you're enjoying it, feel free to drop a sub. Otherwise, yeah, have an awesome rest of your day. Stay safe. Enjoy some good food and company. We'll catch y'all back live later. Adios for now.